Fixing the darn road is a big part of Governor Evers' proposed budget. From creating electric vehicle infrastructure to hiring more state troopers to repairing local roads. NBC 15's Vanessa Kelson spoke with the state's Director of Transportation to learn more about the budget's plans for road safety.
Governor Evers plans to allocate $565 million in federal and state funds for major highway programs throughout Wisconsin. Part of those funds would go toward adding 35 sheriffs and 10 inspectors to Wisconsin's highways. Wisconsin's Department of Transportation director says this increase in law enforcement will improve road safety for all, from ensuring semis are following weight limits to stopping speeders on the highway.
That they know that their job is to keep us all safe and be respectful when there is a traffic stop. And I feel very confident about the training and the quality of people we have at State Patrol, that the net effect of these increased troopers will mean that Wisconsinites will be safer on the roadways.
The budget also plans to implement the driver's licenses for all program, where people can receive driver's licenses regardless of documentation status. Live in the studio, Vanessa Kelson, NBC 15 News.